This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Brett Dolan's with us on the McClarty Daniel hotline. Brett, of course, from RSN, covers a lot of the Arkansas teams, if not every single one of them. Touchdown Radio as well. He's been on the call all year long for their schedule of games, which last week included Texas visiting TCU and the Longhorns pulling out a 29-26 victory. Man, Brett, you guys pick tight ball games this year. Outside of Michigan's blowout of Michigan State and Penn State shutting out Iowa, you've seen virtually nothing but games that come down to the very end, as the last three and certainly last week for you did.
Yeah, Phil, we have been lucky, and I said that as much last week when TCU was trying to pull off a crazy comeback, and they scored 3 touchdowns, hoping to get the ball back one more time with a chance to tie or win, and they couldn't stop at 3rd and 12. Texas deep in their own territory. But we've been fortunate. You know, you pick these games, some of them you pick weeks in advance or months. Others you wait and you get a couple of weeks out, and it's a little bit of a potluck. But we can't complain. I hope we get one more this week, and then the Iron Bowl lives up to its normal billing in a couple of weeks just to kind of finish off what has been a really entertaining regular season.
So Jonathan Brooks goes down with the ACL tear, and he's out for the season. What do you think this does to Texas's hopes to finish the season as a Big 12 champion and maybe make the playoff and go from there?
Well, it doesn't hurt it doesn't help that Brooks is out. But I think other things that will hurt Texas is the fact that the Big 12 is no longer quite as good as we thought. You know, I think Texas' best hope was a formidable Oklahoma opponent that they could maybe avenge a loss and be a on-the-rise Big 12 champion. But right now they're limping a little bit with their injuries, and they weren't quite as good as I expected, although that wasn't an easy game, a November road game. But, the Big 12 is probably on the wrong side of this playoff conversation right now as it stands. If the Pac-12 gets one, the Big 10 gets one or two, the SEC gets at least one, and then, Florida State may be a possibility as well. So they're on the wrong side right now.
Well, a team that's a year early to the party is Louisville, and I don't know if it's their schedule this year, but they're probably going to win out. I think they can beat Miami. I know that's a coin flip game, but 9-1. Coach Braun is their coach. Is that Jake Plummer's son that's playing? They got a lot of quarterback play there. Are you buying into this Louisville team, and do you think that I know he's a legacy as far as Coach Braun there at Louisville. Do you think he stays there, or could he be a guy that's on the move?
No, I think he's going to stay for a long time. In fact, a couple of years ago when his Purdue team took down my Iowa team, I kept thinking, why isn't he in Louisville? Why doesn't he go away? They probably should have lost that game last Thursday night, and they snuck one out of the fire against a team that I thought that, they certainly should have overwhelmed. Now, I'll be curious to see what they do in Miami this week. I lose my partner. He's back in Miami getting his jersey retired, and I keep telling him that his ACC is not very good. It's Florida State, and they defeated Duke, and they really don't have a ton of teams on their schedule except a championship game with Louisville. So I'll be curious to see if Louisville can knock off Florida State. I think it might take the ACC out. But right now they're clearly the second-best team in that conference, and the ACC needs better teams. They need a few more teams to compete, because if Florida State gets in, Matt, I think that's the one that we know the least about. I mean, I think they're pretty good, and that win against LSU early in the year seems to be the feather in their cap, but are they as good as an Oregon or a Washington or a Michigan or an Ohio State or a Georgia or an Alabama? I don't know.
Are you telling me Gino Torretta has, ACC pride? I mean, did he play at Miami when they were independent, or were they just about to join the Big East?
Well, it's a great point. I tease him a little bit because I keep saying, the ACC needs to be better. It's not good enough. And I'm like, Florida State, who are they playing in the last half of the year? And, they're playing Louisville. And I'm like, all right, but, we'll see if the Hurricanes take down Louisville this week in Miami. I think Louisville's better. But, again, you go on the road in November, and weird things happen, and upsets aren't quite as stellar as they were a couple of months back, and they don't seem quite as shocking. But no, he just likes to do that because I throw a lot of Big Ten smoke at him, and he gets tired of hearing that, so I give it back to him on the ACC.
It's all defensive smoke out of the Big Ten anyway. Speaking of Miami, you saw them beat A&M second week of the season. After that game, that's the kind of game that I think they fired Jimbo Fisher for. You know, it's a guy that's got a winning record in the SEC, but didn't beat Ole Miss enough, didn't beat Alabama enough, didn't win any division titles. You got to win games like that. Even though it's out of conference, you got to win games like Miami, the way that they're paying him and the way that A&M wants to view themselves. With that idea, any surprise at all they got rid of him right now, or did you think that maybe it would have been another year?
Well, I think at least I thought he'd get through this year. Now, I know what they're thinking. If we can make a move now, we can be the first opening that these hot candidates think about, and we've got a little bit of time to get out ahead of this before other schools start doing the same thing. Phil, I couldn't agree more as far as losing a game to Miami, because you know you're going to have a couple of losses here and there in the SEC, but when you lose a game out of conference, and it just starts the season on a bad note, and it frustrates people, and I think that sent the thing spiraling down. When Jimbo took that job, guys, and not to name drop too much, but just for the sake of a point, I got to be in his office, and it was him and me, and he was telling me about his vision for the program. And he said, you know, we're going to recruit Houston and Dallas extremely well. And they did. We're going to get all kinds of 5 stars and 4 stars. They did. And he goes, we're going to compete for championships. They did not. And they didn't even compete for championships within the confines of their own conference, let alone the NCAA. So the way that things fell down seemed a little shocking, because his record overall isn't that much different than Kevin Sumlin. And he was thrown out of the door, and then Jimbo was thrown out with a much bigger buyout. So I'm surprised it wasn't a little more effective, just because he kind of had me buying in that with the recruits he was going to be better. It just didn't work out. And then a loss to Miami, and then you stumble in conference a few times, and before you know it, it's, the 7th, 8th, 9th best team in the SEC? It's just not to what level they expect.
Brett, I know we were talking a little bit about Florida State. Do you think that if Florida State and Washington – and Washington will have a rematch with Oregon, it looks like. But if Florida State and Washington go undefeated, there's no way they miss out on the Final Four this year, is there?
I don't think so. And you're right. If Washington goes undefeated, they will have to defeat an Oregon team again. And again, I think Oregon's a little better. And I know they didn't win the game. And I think Bo Nix is playing really well. If they defeat Oregon a second time, I think they're in. And even Florida State, I don't know if their resume will look as good as maybe a handful of other teams, just because of the ACC's weakness. But I don't think they miss out. So then it becomes a situation where the Big Ten's only going to get one team, not two. And, you know, that leaves Georgia. But Alabama's playing over the last 3 weeks as well as anybody. And could they defeat Georgia? Maybe. Or, you know, we'll see. But I think if you go undefeated, you're in a pretty good spot. The Big Ten's the curious one, though, Matt, because of that. You know, Ohio State and Michigan both within the top 4, and they'll meet next week. I don't know what Michigan team I'm going to get this week, because if ever there was a definition of a tramp game, it's going on the road without your coach and winning at Penn State last week, and then play at Ohio State next week to go to Maryland in between. So I'm curious to see how they look. To me, I feel like they are very much a top 4 team. But either way, I think that leaves the Big Ten with one, and that's fine. I mean, the Big Ten doesn't need 2 teams, and the SEC doesn't need 2. I'd kind of like to see a Washington or Oregon or even a Florida State in the top 4, just to kind of get the representation from the different leagues in different regions of the country.
You get Michigan at Maryland this weekend. You've seen Michigan already once. Harbaugh calls them America's team. I mean, I don't know how you can say that with a straight face. Are they America's team, or are they the villain of all of college football right now?
They probably are much more the villain. You know, I listened to the 35-minute press conference with Jim Harbaugh, and I told Gino, I said, I'm going to have to reconsider my entire training regimen, because I'm watching him say we're America's team. He spent 3.5 minutes talking about the chickens that he raises in the backyard of his home and how they lay an egg every 24 hours. I feel like he's taken way too many shots to the head with plastic helmets in his day. It's just something about Jim that doesn't quite make sense when I'm listening to him. I guess, and Matt's been a part of this much more than you and I have. You know, you kind of rally your team together, and whatever the calling card is that week, you know, it's us against everybody else. And maybe it works within the locker room. It seems a little bizarre for us that are watching from outside, but I will say this, they seem to be rowing in the same direction. They seem to be playing for each other. They seem to be buying into trying to have an undefeated regular season. And if they win against Ohio State and Maryland, they'll beat the West team in the playoff, probably Iowa, in the Big Ten championship game. But it's a bizarre year, because Their assistant coach crying after the game. I mean, Harbaugh's not on his deathbed. He's in the hotel a mile away, accused of cheating. It's not a win-win for the Gipper, but they seem to believe it is. So, more power to them, I guess.
Brett, give me there's going to be some good games coming up. Give me the player that you think is going to have the Heisman moment this year. Is it going to be Michael Penix out at Washington? Is it Bo Nix getting that revenge game? Is it J.J. McCarthy taking Michigan to an undefeated season? Who do you think is going to step up and shine and really take a hold of that Heisman these next couple weeks?
It's a great question, and I love it. It's one that I talk about with subplot with my Heisman winner a lot. I think if you were a betting guy, you might say Michael Penix. He's going to put up numbers. Even in games where he's not elite, he's going to throw for 303 or 4 touchdowns. I think Bo Nix has been a little bit better, but he has to beat Penix in the championship game in Las Vegas. J.J. McCarthy is extremely good, but my goodness, they didn't do anything to help his cause by not throwing the ball one time in the second half against Penn State. They tried once. It was a pass interference penalty, but no official passes in the second half. And Jaden Daniels, of all the players I've seen this year, and I haven't seen Penix in person this year, but I've seen him previously, Jaden Daniels is the most electrifying guy. His quickness, his ability to run the big plays, and those are what we think of at Heisman moments, a 50-yard run or a 60-yard pass. He seems to have more of those. I hope his team's record compared to others doesn't hurt him, Matt. I think he deserves an invite to New York. I said it in early October when I saw him. This kid deserves to be in New York. I think he is the most exciting player in college football, but I think Penix probably has the best chance to have a Heisman moment against Oregon and Las Vegas in the Pac-12 championship game to give himself a chance to win the trophy.
Well, I mean, it's sort of like Lamar Jackson, right? When he won the Heisman.
They have 3 or 4 losses, Phil.
I think he had 3.
3 losses, I think.
RG3, I think, had
Baylor
had 3 losses when he won the Heisman. I mean, Jaden Daniels is kind of in the same mold as those 2 quarterbacks, right?
No, that's a great follow-up to that, because I saw Lamar Jackson. I had one of his games on touchdown radio, and when I got done with his combination of speed and passing, it's a similar mood that I had after watching Jaden Daniels bring his team back from 15 down at Mizzou. And had Mizzou won that game, we'd be talking about the Tigers right now facing the Georgia Bulldogs, or a possibility of maybe sneaking in as the 4th or 5th team with only 1 loss. But no, it's a good comparison, because Lamar did things that just made you gasp, but you just couldn't believe how he was outrunning everybody on the football field, and then, drop back and throw a 40, 50-yard touchdown pass. Daniels has the same type of feel, and he has to be good. I know his defense isn't great, so he has to constantly be scoring points and putting up numbers. But when you watch him play for 3 hours, it's as entertaining as anybody in college football.
BetOnline is your #1 source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.